You know those massive construction projects? We're talking skyscrapers, giant bridges, things that change a city's skyline. They're incredibly high stakes with billions of dollars on the line. But here's the thing, for the contractors who actually build them, just winning the bid is the easy part. The real battle is finishing the project without losing their shirt. So how do the successful ones actually pull it off?
It's a question that really hangs over the entire industry, right? You hear about a project with this eye-watering budget, but a few years down the line, it's just hemorrhaging money and massively overspent. Why does this happen so often? Well, it all boils down to one fundamental problem. And here it is, let's call this the villain of our story: competitive bidding risk. It's that scary, unpredictable gap between what a contractor thinks the job will cost when they submit their price and what it actually ends up costing. Things like unforeseen ground conditions, sudden design changes, material prices going through the roof, that's where all those nasty surprises live, just waiting to chew up your entire profit margin.
But what if you could actually manage that risk, instead of just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best? Well, this is where our hero comes in. A structured, three-phase framework designed to turn all that uncertainty into something you can actually control. It's a real game plan for winning, not just the bid, but the whole financial battle. Let's dive in and break it down.
So, phase one is all about putting on your detective hat. Before you even dream of putting a number on a bid, you have to become a world-class investigator. Your job is to sift through every single document to find the hidden traps and financial landmines just waiting to go off. Your first line of defense is a professional called a quantity surveyor, or a QS. You can think of them as the financial CSI for a construction project. They go through the tender documents with a fine-tooth comb. Are the designs actually finished, or are they full of holes? Is the contract language super vague in a way that could let the scope balloon later on? And maybe most importantly, is this design even detailed enough to offer a fixed lump sum price? Promising that with a solid design is a huge gamble. The QS flags all of this stuff right at the beginning. Now, here's a term you've got to watch out for: provisional sums. This is basically a placeholder for money. It's used when the client hasn't quite figured out a part of the design yet. On the surface, it might sound helpful, but honestly, it's a massive red flag for uncertainty. It's like a giant question mark in the middle of your budget, because the contractor is still responsible for the schedule and resources, even when the final scoop is a total mystery. And here's another one. If you see the phrase approximate quantities, your alarm bell should be ringing loudly. It basically means, hey, we're just kind of guessing on the amounts here. This is a guarantee that all that work will have to be completely remeasured later, which can totally blow up the final price and creates a massive risk for the contractor. All right, so you've done your detective work, you've found all the risks. Now what? Well, now comes phase two, and this part is all about strategy. You have to actually put a price tag on all that uncertainty you uncovered, and this isn't about guesswork, it's about a methodical, calculated approach. You do this by adding something called contingency. And I have to be crystal clear on this point. Contingency is not extra profit. It's not a slush fund for your overheads. It is a very specific calculated amount of money set aside only to cover the costs of those specific risks you identified back in phase one. Think of it like a financial shock absorber for the project. So how do you figure out how much you need? Well, there are two main ways to go about it. If you're looking at a project that's, still a sketch on a napkin with a very new design, you might use a broad, big picture percentage. But for a project that's more developed, you're going to want to use a much more precise, line-by-line approach called a detailed analysis. Let's take a look at how that actually works. Okay, so here's the detailed method in action. Instead of one flat percentage for the whole project, you break it down and assign a unique risk level to each part of the job. Groundwork, for example, can be super unpredictable, right? So we give it a high risk factor of 15%. The structural frame, that's pretty standard stuff, so it gets a much lower 5%. The complex electrical and plumbing systems, the MEP, maybe a medium 8%. And the finishes, well, those are pretty predictable, so just 2%. You do the math for each line, add it all up, and voila, you get a very specific, tailored contingency amount. And that right there, that's 6.95%, that's the magic number. The crucial point is that instead of just guessing and slapping a generic 10% on the total cost, this detailed analysis gives you a precise, and more importantly, a defensible number. This is the real difference between just gambling and actively managing your financial risk. Okay, deep breath. You've identified the risks, you've priced them into your bid, and you won the contract. Awesome. But you are not done yet, not by a long shot. Now we enter the third and final phase, managing all those challenges after the contract is signed. This is where the job shifts from just pricing risk to actively guarding against it every single day on site. The moment that contract is signed, the game completely changes. That contingency fund we just calculated, that's now a real budget that needs to be managed carefully. The focus is no longer on pricing, it's all about process and procedure. Every single potential change, every little issue has to be handled by the book, through the formal rules laid out in the contract. This is what keeps costs from spiraling out of control.
So what does that actually look like in practice? Well, it really boils down to 3 key disciplines. First, you monitor any changes or variations. Rule number 1, nothing gets done on a verbal say-so. Every single change needs a formal written instruction. Second, you manage claims. When those changes happen, you submit a formal claim with all the evidence to adjust the price accordingly. And finally, you keep meticulous records of everything. Timely notices, daily logs, photos. That paper trail is what preserves your right to get paid fairly for the work you do.
Now, these claims aren't a sign of failure. They're a normal part of the construction process. And you know what? They often spring directly from those exact risks that were flagged way back in the tender documents. Let's quickly run through the most common types. A whole bunch of claims come straight from the client. They might officially direct a change or tell the team to stop work or even speed things up. But sometimes it's a lot more subtle. You have these sneaky ones called constructive changes. That's when the plans or specs are so unclear that you're basically forced to do extra work just to make things right. See? This is where that intense document review in Phase 1 really pays off.
And then, of course, you have the stuff that comes completely out of left field, things nobody could have fully predicted. You start digging and hit a layer of rock that wasn't in any of the geological surveys? That's a different site condition. A freak hurricane shuts down the site for a week? That's what we call a force majeure event. A well-written contract has procedures built in to handle these kinds of unknowns.
So when you step back and look at all 3 of these phases working together, what you're really seeing is a fundamental shift in approach. You're moving away from making a high-stakes bet and moving toward executing a well-thought-out, strategic game plan. This quote from the source material just nails it perfectly. The whole point isn't to eliminate risk. That's impossible in construction. The point is to transform that big, scary cloud of uncertainty into something you can actually control, manage, and price with confidence. It's all about protecting that profit you worked so hard to earn.
And that really just leaves us with one final question to think about. For anyone who's in this industry, you have to ask yourself, is your next bid going to be based on hope and a bit of luck, or is it going to be based on a disciplined, structured game plan? Because at the end of the day, that's what separates the projects that succeed from the ones that become cautionary tales.